The Holy Gospel according to Matthew, the 2nd chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judah, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising until it stopped. It stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. This is the word of the Lord. And you may be seated. When I was a kid, whenever I was with friends on Friday nights, if we could keep ourselves up late enough, hanging out on Friday nights meant flipping on the television and taking in another episode of Friday Night Videos. Does anyone remember this? On NBC. It was on Friday nights on NBC. If you lived out your adolescence in the 80s, as I did, Friday nights meant Friday Night Videos. It was, like I said, this NBC show that played 90 minutes of straight music videos starting way late in the evening. And they weren't just any videos. These were the top 40 music videos, the music videos that were hot, right? They played all the greats of the 80s there. Anyone remember people like Bon Jovi, right? Aerosmith, Kiss, right? The Police, the Cars, Billy Joel. There were the weird antics of Weird Al Yankovic, right? Just naming all these bands makes me want my mullet back, huh? Man. The most popular part of the show, if you maybe remember, was Video Vote. This was part of the show. Two music videos were played back to back, and viewers from across the country, from California to New York, you were invited to call in and vote on which was your favorite of these two videos. And I remember as a young teenager, I remember sitting there and watching these music videos with my friends, my hair filled with mousse, I imagine, probably wearing my favorite pair of Zubas, huh? I remember watching, thinking, these are my people, right? This is my generation. These rebellious rock stars are speaking to me. They get me. And for a moment, in the evenings on Friday nights, I joined with kids all my age throughout the U.S., and we were all simultaneously given a voice through the defiant lyrics of rock and roll. Huh? Even the dress of these superstars represented our generation. They were anything but traditional. Huh? Young superstars wearing leg warmers. Admit it. Who had a pair, right? Yeah, you're not going to admit it, huh? Young men and women alike wearing neon anything. We wore tight-rolled jeans and oversized sweatshirts, and oh, the hair. There was so much hair in the 80s, huh? I suppose it wasn't all that unlike generations past, who tuned in after school to watch Philadelphia's youth bopping to American Bandstand. Anyone remember that one? Huh? I suppose in our youth we all want to see on national television people who give voice to who we are. Well, I remember watching those Friday night videos feeling as though these were my people. And yet, well, the reality was, I wasn't from somewhere remotely hip, like California or New York. No. The reality was, I was from little old Castleton, North Dakota. And truth be told, I was a timid little junior high kid from a town of some 1,000 people, raised by a bunch of Scandinavian Midwesterners. I was anything but hip and cool and countercultural as those rock stars were I saw on television every Friday night. And it's hard to believe, but I really didn't have a defiant bone in my body way back then. And each and every Friday night, these loud, bold rock stars, week after week, would sort of stick it to the man with their music. And here I was on the prairies of North Dakota in the middle of puberty. My high school mascot was a squirrel, and all I wanted was my acne to go away and that principal's daughter, Jennifer Lorenzen, to notice me. Looking back on my adolescence, I suppose I was glued to the TV each Friday night, not because those 80s icons of rock and roll were so much like me. If I were honest, I tuned in each and every Friday night because they were so not like me. I knew I was watching ordinary people from California or New York, but they might as well have been from some exotic, magical place like Harry Potter's Hogwarts. Which sort of reminds me, believe it or not, it reminds me of the story we heard today, the story of those three kings, right? You see, usually I think we've come to think that those kings are a pretty normal part of the story. We envision little children in bathrobes and Christmas programs with makeshift crowns on their head. We think of these powerful kings, but coming gently as faith-filled seekers, right? Seekers of Jesus. They become an expected part of the story. There with Mary and Joseph and the innkeeper and the shepherds. But folks, these so-called kings were never intended to just blend into this story. In fact, these kings, the reality is they aren't even kings. Nowhere in the Bible does it actually ever call them kings. In our bulletin today, in that translation, it implies that they are wise men, sort of scholarly, highbrow sort of men. But that's still quite a ways from who these men really were. You see, they were far more exotic. You see, the original translation for who these folks were calls them magi, right? These were people from far off and exotic locations, mysterious people, I imagine, who read crystal balls or played with Ouija boards or experimented with black magic. They followed horoscopes, studied the zodiac. These guys were the kind of guys you'd find in little shops in dark alleys or in circus sideshows. They were from the far-off east, And they came carrying these mysterious perfumes, incense, medicinal herbs. Folks, think about magic wands and spells like Harry Potter and the Hogwarts school of witchcraft and wizardry, These aren't just ordinary kings we're talking about. These are outsiders with the volume turned up as loud as the music will play. And as the story goes, when these magi meander into Jerusalem, asking for the newborn king of the Jews, Herod and all the Pharisees and the scribes and all those muckety-mucks of the day could not be more shocked and perplexed if it were AC/DC or Madonna who came strutting into town. You see, all the prophets, All the prophets from Isaiah to Jeremiah had announced that all nations would come to know this God, but few imagined that God would actually include the likes of people who came reading horoscopes, or Ouija boards in tow. It's interesting, isn't it? It's kind of interesting how the story has morphed a little bit. It's changed. These weren't kings. These were among the top 40 outsiders of all time. Magi at the birth of Jesus would be like KISS or AC/DC providing special music on Sunday morning, And I suppose we could attribute some of this morphing to the piety of the church working sort of overtime, morphing these exotic, bizarre magi into more respectable wise men, and morphing these intellectual wise men into more respectable kings. And though the Bible doesn't say there were three, every year it's Christmas programs, 3 crowned kings come bearing gifts. As kids coloring with crayons, our imaginations have run wild, and we embellish and color the story. It's kind of different. It's kind of wild, And folks, I kind of wonder tonight, as we read this story, I wonder if maybe that's the whole point of the story. If that's why we tell it year after year. If that's what the writer intended. I think it is. If spellbinding, star-reading magicians are invited into the story of God breaking into this world, just maybe this story invites us to use our imaginations a bit. If magi are at the stable, who else might have a place in God's story? Who else that we don't expect might have a seat there too? I mean, if magicians, magi are there, doesn't that invite us to think a little outside the box when it comes to this faith? To imagine the unimaginable, that God's family really has no bounds. That the breadth of God's reach is so much bigger than our reach. So much so that magi from the East and kids from California to New York and everyone in between have a place in this story. Everyone from magicians to kings to shepherds to scared and nervous peasant parents. And so I wonder, looking at our world today, I imagine there too must be an important place for people in our world too. An important place in God's story for, well, as you turn on the TV, those young African American men we see down in Ferguson, Missouri, fed up with the injustices of racism. There must be an important place in God's story for immigrants who just want a better life for their families, whether they're documented or not. If magi have a place in the story, there must be an important place for refugees, right, who come in search of a better life for their family. I know there's an important place in the story of our faith, for single mothers and single fathers, for the poor, those who have lost their jobs, their livelihood, those who struggle to put food on the table. There's an important place for everyone, anyone and everyone, who has at one time or another felt on the outside, as though things aren't as they should be. Folks, that's the story of the Magi. There's a place in God's story for all. And I suppose it's no wonder that then when that Herod and all those first century muckety-mucks, that they shake in fear when the wise men show up and ask for Jesus, right? The King of the Jews. Because this King Jesus is king over a wider, a more generous kingdom than anyone could have ever imagined. A kingdom where there is just simply no control over who's let in. And thank God for that. Folks, when the ancient writer Matthew, who wrote these words way back when he wrote this story way back when, I wonder if he ever imagined how at Sunday school Christmas programs all over the world, children from California to New York, Singapore to Paris, how children from all around the world, year after year, would put on bathrobes, right? And spray-painted Burger King crowns, right? carrying tin-foil covered boxes and bottles and makeshift bars of gold. And during those programs, they'd make their way down the aisle, the church aisle, to a stable where a little Mary and Joseph would hold a plastic baby doll Jesus, And all the while those kids do that, those children from all reaches of the world would imagine, as they play the role of the wise men, that they too are part of the great story of Jesus and God's love for all the world. I wonder if he ever imagined that they too have a place among the innkeeper, the shepherds, and those nervous parents and the magi, that they have a place in God's story, just like you and me. Thanks be to God. Amen.